everyone, happy fall! My name is Miss Casey with FIBO Kids Art Academy, and I am so excited today to be teaching you a fall craft project. Today we are going to be learning how to create on our very own a checkerboard or a chessboard. Now checkers and chessboards look the same. They both have a grid. However, the pieces are going to be a little different. So we're going to be making our base checker or chess board today, and then I'll also tell you all the different pieces that you may need and how we can create that, and we're going to have a lot of fun crafting all of that together. So to get started, what we are going to be needing, we're not going to do a practice draw together today. We are just going to go straight into our final draw. But to get started, we are going to start with the base for the board of our checkers or chessboard. Now for the base, I am going to be using a piece of wood. So for my wood, I found here has a little frame at the end. It kind of looks like a little tray, which I thought was really fun. So that's the piece of wood that I found. However, you can use any kind of wood, and it can be any size. Everyone's going to be getting something a little bit differently, so everyone's going to have different sizes, different colors, different looks, and all of that is totally fine. It's all going to still work the same. But if you don't have a piece of wood or you're not able to get one, you can also just use a piece of paper for that base of your board today. So either one works. However, as you notice, they are going to be different sizes. So don't worry about that. I'm going to show you what we can do to get it all the same size. Now, on my board, as you can see, it's really big. I have 18 inches across and 14 inches up and down. So before you get started, if you know the dimensions of your board, go ahead and make sure to kind of write it down just to remind yourself, because what we want to do is we want to create a square for our board today. So whether yours is rectangular or it already starts off as a square, we are going to make sure if you have a rectangular board, we cut it down to where we have a square board to work with. Now, I don't mean cutting it. You don't have to cut your board, but we're going to kind of measure it out so that way we only paint that square board in our wood today, or even your paper. Okay? So what we're going to need to do, now that I know mine is 18 across and 14 inches up and down, I'm going to take that larger number, 18, and try to have a square. So I'm going to make it the same inches as that 14 that goes across. So 18 minus 14 is 4. So 4 inches is what I need to cut down on my board here. So that's pretty simple. It's just 2 inches on one side and 2 inches on the other. Okay, so if I were to bring it 2 inches inward on the left, 2 inches inward on the right, I would have a perfect square, 14 across and 14 up and down. All right, now you just want to make sure that you measure that out correctly so you can get a nice square. Now, once you have measured that out, you can go ahead and take a ruler, a straight edge, whatever you have, and you're going to be taking your pencil. So go ahead and take your pencil so you can map this out. However, so you can see my lines just a little better, I'm going to be using my Sharpie on my board here. Okay, so 2 inches from the edge of my board. Now I've already kind of pre-measured this, so again, if you need a ruler, go ahead and measure 2 inches if you need 2 inches. Everyone's going to be a little different again. So however much you need from the edge, go ahead and draw that line to remind you what you're not going to be painting in for your board today. Okay, so that's 2 inches from my side. It's going to be different for you, but on the other side here, again, I want to measure out that however much I need from that side taken out, which for me is 2 inches, and I'm going to draw that in. So again, you should be using a pencil. So now that I have made those marks, again, I have a perfect square, 14 across and 14 down. All right, so now that I have the square of my board, next what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the grid. Now when we create the grid, we want 8 rows going across and 8 rows going down. Okay, so we have a perfect 8 on each side, and that's going to be 8 times 8 So you want that many squares on your board today. So in order to create 8 squares going across, we want to cut our square board in the middle. Now again, we're not physically cutting, that is just lingo for knowing how to measure this up. So we have those 2 end lines to make it a square. Now we want to find the middle. Now again, you can use a ruler or a straight edge, however you would like to measure this. It doesn't have to necessarily be perfect. You want to get it the best that you can. Okay, so again, find that middle and then grab your ruler or your straight edge and go ahead and just draw that middle line going directly down your board. Okay, so I have divided my board up in the middle. Now what we're going to do is we are going to divide those 2 halves in half. So in this left side, I want to find the middle of that, and again, you can measure it, or you can just take a ruler, straight edge, and find the middle, and then draw your line. So I want to find that middle here, and then once I have that middle, I'm going to draw my line down. And again, you should be using your pencil when you do this. All right, so again, now I have half and half. I want to do the same thing on that right side. So find that middle area, use a ruler or straight edge, and draw your line. Now again, you just want to do the best that you can. Okay, so now I have all of those cut in half. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, but we want 8 squares going across. So now in each of those sections, we want to again find that middle area. So find the middle and draw your line for that far left section. Okay, so there I have that cut in half. Now I'm going to do the same thing for this next section. Find the middle, draw my line down. All right, and now I'm going to go over to the other side and do the same thing. Find that middle and draw my line. Now, remember, this is a recording. So at any time, if you need a little bit more time, if you want to measure things out, if you need to measure the dimensions of your board before any of this even happened, feel free to pause, and you can always press play when you're ready to continue with this. So now I have my last section, and I'm going to split that in the middle. So find the center and draw my line. Okay. However, that's not the end. We need to make a grid. So I just have my vertical lines. Now I'm going to draw my horizontal lines to make it go across and get 8 coming down the sides. Now remember, those 2 lines at the end, if you needed to cut it to make a perfect square, those pretty much don't exist. So we're just working with this inner area here. Okay? So now what we want to do is from the top and bottom of your board, you want to find the middle. So you can go ahead and turn it vertical so it's a little bit easier to see, or you can leave it horizontal, whatever's best for you. You can use a ruler, straight edge, however you feel comfortable finding that center area and making your line. Go ahead and do that. Again, make sure you're using your pencil. And then once you find that middle area, just draw your line all the way across, but don't go past those outside lines. Keep it inside your square. Okay, so now I have my middle line. Next, just like we did for the top part, our vertical lines, we're going to find the middle in each half that we make. So now on my left half, I'm going to find the middle. Okay, and then make my line. And again, just do the best that you can if you're using a ruler or if you're using a straight edge. That should help. All right, now I'm going to go over to my right side, find the middle, and make my line. As best that you can. All right, so now I have split into 4s, but again, we don't want 4, we want 8. So we got to split each section again. So find the middle of that far left section and draw your line. Now, do be careful as you're drawing on wood if you are working with wood, because as we may know, wood does splinter, so you don't want to drag your hand and maybe catch some splinters. So be very careful. If you need, maybe wear gloves, or you can even have like a paper towel underneath you or a cloth as you're dragging your lines across. Okay? Now, I have my first section. I'm going to go to my next section, find that middle, and draw my line. So now you can start to see that grid going on your board. Okay, but again, we don't want just a little bit, we want the full board. So now I'm going to go over to this section, find the middle, and draw my line. And last section, we're almost there, you guys. I'm going to find the middle and draw my line. All right, friends, now you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 going across, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 going down. There's your perfect square. Wonderful job, everyone. So now that our drawing is done, if you happen to have these extra areas on the ends, if you had a rectangular wood piece, or if you had a rectangular paper, you can decorate that and have a little bit of fun with it. So for example, on my ends here, I'm thinking that I maybe might want to write happy fall. I think that could be fun. Now, since everyone's going to be doing something a little different, I'm going to be doing my writing in pencil, so that way later on when I go into paint it or maybe trace it over with a different marker, my Sharpie is not in the way. Now, when I draw my letters or words, I'm going to be using cursive, but you can do any words you want, maybe bubble letters, maybe block letters, however you'd like, if you would like to add words. That's totally up to you. But I'm going to do some cursive, and I'm also going to bring this first word facing in. You may be able to see a little bit of that. Might be a little hard to see it. That's okay. Just go ahead. If you're following along with me, just do your best. I'm doing cursive and I'm writing happy. I think I'm going to write the word happy there. And then I'm going to flip it and do it inward again. And I think over here I'm going to write the word fall. Have a little fall chess or checkerboard. So now I'm going to do my cursive for the word fall. Okay, so here I have happy, and here I have fall. Now on the ends, if there's a little decoration that you want to add, you can go ahead and draw that. Or part of our project here as well is gathering up some materials that you can use for your checkers or chess pieces. So if you maybe had purchased some materials, you can also purchase materials to decorate. So I grabbed some materials that I had. I think I'm going to decorate on the edges with some leaves once we get into that coloring step. So that's what I'm going to do. But if you want to draw it instead and paint it on, that's totally up to you. Okay? And once you have that, that is it for our drawing steps. Okay? So if you're still working on that drawing, getting those lines perfect, getting those measurements perfect, that's totally fine. Just make sure to pause, take your time, and then press play when you're ready to continue. All right, friends, now that we have our chessboard here, next is the tricky part. Now we're going to paint it. Now when you paint it, we are going to try and get our lines as perfectly straight as we can. Now this is why we did this in pencil, because now what we're going to do is using some blue painter's tape. And this is painter's tape. You can get white painter's tape. But this is blue. And I've also have a pretty thick tape. There are different kinds of tape that you can get. Some are thin, some are thick. I prefer the thick just because it's pretty much very close in size to my actual squares here, and that would be less tape that I need to use. But if you have a smaller piece of tape, you can just use two pieces to match the width of your squares. Okay, so either one works. Go ahead and grab out whatever you have. And then using your tape, we're going to tape up some of our squares, and we are going to be painting them in. Okay, so I'm just going to take my tape here, and I'm going to go and cross tape over this first section, this first column or row, whichever way you're working. You want to line it up to that outer edge the best that you can, as straight as you can get it. If you have a little lip on the edge of your paper, maybe it's like a little frame, you can just tape it up to that edge. Okay, now it turns out my squares are actually just a little bigger than my tape here, so I am going to need an extra piece. So that might happen for you, and that's okay. You can just go ahead and find the edge of that next line just for that first column or row. Now the reason why we do our tape here is so that way we can get nice clean edges, nice clean lines, and the paint does not cover or go through the tape. Okay, so if you're doing this on white paper, just be very cautious. You really want to make sure that the type of tape you're using is painter's tape, because on wood, that tape is going to come off very nicely. On paper, painter's tape does come off very easily and nicely on paper, but if you're not using painter's tape, it may be a little difficult to take that tape off. So just be cautious of that. Alrighty, so now I'm going to skip over this next row and tape the third row. But again, I want to make sure I go right along those edges, get it as straight as I can. So even though we measured and drew our grid, really what matters is where this tape goes placed. So those lines that we drew are just really to help us map out where we want that tape to go. Okay. Again, make sure it lines up to that bottom edge nicely, nice and straight, the best that you can. Okay, and now you're just going to do the same thing. You're just going to keep going, skipping over every other row. So go up to that next edge nicely. Stick that down. Now if you don't have tape, or if you don't want to use tape, if you like the lines that you made and you're okay with not using tape, then that's totally fine. You don't have to use tape, but tape is definitely going to be helpful in making those lines straight when we get to painting. So for example, if you are using the white paper and you don't have anything, you don't have painter's tape, just go ahead and leave your lines and don't worry about taping them off. Because anything else like Scotch tape or duct tape is definitely not going to be helpful for you. Alright, there we go. Now this does take some time and some patience, so just take your time. If you end up working while I finish up, you can just pause, continue working. Remember, it's every other. Now, this is just the tape, so if you accidentally tape the wrong row, wrong column, you can just lift it and retape. So this is really easy, really forgiving. Just go ahead and do the best that you can, and if you do make a mistake, just lift it and retape. So just make sure you're taking your time. All right, this is my last piece of tape I'm going to be using right along that edge. Now, the edges of the tape are really nice and straight. So if you happen to see that the tape doesn't really follow along your pencil lines, I would say go with the tape rather than your lines because that tape is much straighter. Even if you used a ruler, sometimes it's hard to really make perfect straight lines. Sometimes we make them just a little crooked. So using the edge of your tape should really help. Okay, so now that we've taped off those 4 rows, every other one, next we're going to continue with our tape, and now we're going to do those the rows going the opposite way. Okay, so now we're going to do every other one as well. Go ahead and leave the top row open and then go along the second row. Make sure that you go right along those edges the best that you can. Try not to go on top of another square. Okay, you want to leave those squares empty. No tape. And you can go again to get that bottom edge. The best that you can. Now it's okay if you go over the side here. We're just focusing on the inner square for now. Okay, so now that we have that taped off, you're going to again skip over that next row, go to the 4th row, and you're just going to keep doing that with your tape. Make sure you find that edge nicely. You should see nice squares in those empty areas. And again, you're just doing the best that you can. This is all handmade, so if there's a little bit of error, that's all part of the fun. Okay, so don't be too hard on yourself, just have fun. As long as you're taking your time and trying your best, that's all that matters. Okay. Now I'm going to get that last bottom row. And again, if it doesn't really match up with your lines, that's okay. I would trust the tape more. Okay. I don't have to worry about these because I'm not going to be painting up to those areas. So I'm just going to leave it like that. But I do want to make sure I kind of tape this off here. So I do want to protect that edge and make sure I don't put any paint in there. Okay. So that's taped off there on that edge. That edge is protected because I have this chunk of tape. Okay, so now that we have that, next what we're going to be doing is painting in those first set of squares. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with that. So when you're doing your paint step, what we need to do first is we need to get our materials. So you can set your board to the side for now. If you have your paint in front of you already, perfect. But I'm going to go ahead and show you how I'm going to set my paint up. So when you have your paint materials, you want to make sure you have a paper towel. Go ahead and grab out yourself a palette. You also want to make sure you have a water bucket. I'm going to be using acrylics for my paint step. but we still want to have a water bucket to help clean off if we switch from different colors. Now the colors that I'm going to be using are going to be more like fall colors. This is a color scheme that I think matches fall pretty well. So we have red, orange, yellow, white, brown, and of course black. So you can use any colors you want for your chess or checkerboard, but I'm going to be using these fall colors. Now I'm only going to be using one color because when you look at a checker or a chessboard, there's usually only two colors that you see on the board. One of the colors, I'm going to leave the color of my wood here. So I'm only going to be using one color to paint the other color on my board. Alrighty. Now if you would prefer to just have two different colors, that's totally fine. You can do it that way as well. But I'm just going to use one color. And I think I'm going to go with some white just to kind of keep it fun. I think the white would look really nice on that board. Okay? But again, if you want to do a little bit more fun, maybe you want to go brown, maybe you want to do orange or red, and that's going to look fun as well. All right, so now that I know the color I want to use, I'm going to put those to the side. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and add my white to my palette. And I know I'm going to use a good amount, so I want to get a good amount on my palette, but you can always add more. You don't want to fill your whole palette up with white because you may not use that, and that's a waste of paint, which we don't want to waste. Okay, so now that I have that, I'm going to be using my large brush since these are pretty large squares. If you are working with a smaller area and you have small squares, then you can use a different size brush. That's up to you. So now I'm going to bring my board back to me. Okay, now in all of these open squares, wherever there is not tape, that is where you want to use your paint. So I'm going to dip my brush into my white here. I don't want to get too much and glob it up right away. I'm going to put my paint on my brush, and I'm just going to start painting right on top into that empty square. Now this is what our tape is for. It helps us make sure we can go a little crazy with where we put our paint and know that the other squares are not going to be affected. They're not going to be painted in. They're protected by that tape. All right, now if you chose not to paint it in, not to tape off your squares, maybe you didn't have tape or maybe you just didn't want to, then you are just going to go into every other square and paint in with that color that you're using. Now you do have a grid on there, so you have those lines to help you and as a guideline to know which squares you want to paint, but be very careful. You want to try and make those edges as clean as you can. Alrighty. Now if your paint is maybe a little bit thin or transparent, you may need a couple of coats of paint on there. My white that I have from this acrylic brand is pretty opaque, so it does cover up my wood pretty well, but even then you may want a couple of extra coats. So I'm just going to take my paint in this last square on this column here, and then move on to the next set of squares. And you can do it from top to bottom, you can do it from left to right. It really doesn't matter as long as you're only painting in those open squares. And then as you're painting, if you made a few extra lines that you didn't really want, that paint is really going to cover up those lines, so you don't even have to worry about it. Okay, as you can see, I had used Sharpie for drawing my lines in, and it's covering up my Sharpie. So this acrylic opaque paint really does a nice job. But again, if you need a few coats, that's fine. Now if you have a flat board piece, then you might just go off the edge and that's fine. But if you have a little lip or frame and you don't want that frame to be painted next to those edges for those squares, make sure to tape that off first so that way you don't paint it. Now if you accidentally do get some paint on it, I am not too worried about it because the stain on this frame here is actually a little bit washed out with some white already, so it's going to kind of look part of my frame. But if your frame is maybe a little dark and you don't want that color you're using on that frame, you can go back in once it's when it's still wet, take some water just along the area that you don't want that paint on and wipe it off with a paper towel, and that should help kind of clean it off. And then you can go back in and tape it so that way you don't have to run into that issue again. Okay, so I'm just painting all of these little squares here. Want to make sure that you get as much as you can along those edges. Sometimes the edges are hard to really get because of that tape. So just do your best. Alrighty. So now I'm on my last column here. I'm going to get those last few set of squares. Now the very important thing that we need to think about for this next step is that when we take off our paint, we want when we take off our tape, we want our paint to be a little dry first, okay? Because we don't want an accidental smudge from the tape onto any other areas. That can definitely be covered up by more paint. But since I'm using the other color, the wood is part of my other color, I really don't want any extra paint getting off these squares here. So I'm going to be waiting for it to dry. And I do recommend that you wait for it to dry a little bit before you take off your tape. But I will say, taking off the tape is very satisfying. It is really fun to pull it off. A lot of artists love that step. So if you're done painting it in your squares, as you can see here, I'm just kind of going in a little extra coat. But once you're done painting in your squares, go ahead and pause for a little bit. Take some time to let that dry. Acrylic, if that's what you're using, does dry pretty fast. So you probably only need to wait maybe 5 minutes at most. And then you can go ahead and take off your tape. All right, so once your paint is dry, just a little bit, doesn't have to be fully dry, but once your paint is dry and you are ready to take off your tape, you want to be very careful and strategic with how you do this. You don't want to just start ripping up the tape. So what you want to do is find those top pieces of your tape. So I know this one here is a top piece. Now, it's a little hard to see it. Here it is. Now, when you lift your tape, you don't want to just go straight up or just kind of rip it. You want to try and pull at an angle. This is a very great technique to practice whenever you're working with tape to help you paint an area. Okay, so as you can see, first edge revealed, it's nice and straight, and no paint has gone underneath that tape. So I'm just going to roll it because I don't want it to get sticky and stick to me and then cause an accident. So I'm going to roll it and then keep lifting. And again, I'm lifting at an angle to the side. I'm going to roll it and then lift at an angle and then roll. You don't have to roll it back. I just prefer to do that so I can make sure I don't have any accidents, because tape and I are not really that great friends. Tape likes to stick to me and then I can't control it. Alrighty, so as you can see, our first edge revealed, everything looks nice and crisp and no extra paint has gone under that tape. So now you're going to find the next pieces of tape that are at the top. So I have these tapes here that are going horizontal. Okay, so you want to find an edge that's easy to lift. Again, you can lift at an angle. I would recommend, because this part is in the middle, I would recommend lifting at an angle on an edge that you want to reveal. Not just because it's fun to see those edges being revealed, but also just to kind of avoid coming into your paint. You want to go away from your paint. Now, if your paint is still a little dry, this part can get a little messy. There might be some wet paint on your tape. You might get it on your fingers. Just feel free to have, a paper towel, a wipe nearby. You can kind of clean as you go. Take a little bit of clean breaks, things like that. All right, so again, my second edge revealed, nice and crisp. It's looking good so far. So I'm going to do my next piece of tape here. And now this time, my edge is on this side, so I'm going to peel away from that edge. Now, sometimes the tape does not latch on to your, got a little dent in there. Sometimes your paint does not latch on to your surface that well, and there will be a little bit of hiccups with where the paint has gotten and seeped through underneath your tape. That does happen very rarely, but it can happen. So if it does happen, don't worry too much about it. It's usually going to be very, very small amounts. Okay, so you don't even need to worry about it. Alrighty. Now I'm going to go ahead and do my next area here. And again, this is on this edge, so I'm going to pull away from that edge. And the more comfortable you feel, maybe the faster you're probably going to get through this step. But I would say still take your time, still be very cautious. As you're taking off your tape, you can kind of just put it on the side in like a pile. Okay. I got my tape over here, lift out and away from my edges. Okay. Ooh, there's a little piece that stayed there. Now, if your paint is still wet and you start to get some on your fingertips, if you don't want paint on any of the other areas, just be very careful with where you place your fingers. Alrighty. So now I have my last row here. Okay, there's that. And then my next tape right along the other edge. Peel away from your edges. Roll that up, put it away. All right, and my last edge here. Okay. Now, as you're lifting this up, you may realize there is one more area that needs to be filled in. This isn't the end of it. It wasn't that easy. So what we're going to do is we're going to peel off all our tape, and we're going to do it one more time. Okay? So now I'm going to go across on these edges here and get my tape off here. I'll try to find a good edge to be able to lift. Here we go. Away from my edge. Okay, roll that up. Put it in my pile. Take my next tape here, away from the edge. Okay. Place it in my pile. And find my next area where I can lift my tape. Here it is. And peel away from my edge. Okay. All right, we're almost there at the very end. Oh, this is coming off as a whole clump. So if that happens, just be careful. because there's no really angle that you can do since it's on both edges. So just be very slow and careful. Okay, there's that, and now, and again, this one's coming off as a clump, both sides of the tape. So just be very careful. All right, now you should have used a pencil, so you wouldn't really be able to see your lines that much, but as you can see, I used my Sharpie so I can still see my lines, and that's okay. If you end up being able to see your lines, if you did use Sharpie, however that is, it's fine. All right, but next, all that's left to do, friends, is to paint in the other areas of our squares. So we want to do every other square, and we have just these middle squares that we need to get inside, because if we go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Okay, so on this row, every other one, since that one's painted, we don't want this first one painted, we want the second one. Don't want this one, we want this one. Don't want this one, so it's going to be every other one on those empty rows that you have. Okay, so you can get a little bit more paint if you need it. This is still going to be the same color. All right. Now you can go ahead and get more tape and then tape it off so that way that edge and that edge is going to be nice and clean. Or if you want and if you trust yourself, you can just go straight in to paint it without any tape. Okay, that's up to you. However, if you do plan on taping it, you may need to tape a little over that area that you've already painted. So be very careful. Make sure that area that you've already painted, if you plan to tape over it, is fully dry before you add that tape. Okay, can't stress that enough. Make sure it's completely dry or otherwise the tape will chip it. All right, so I'm just going to go straight in with my paint here. I'm going to be very careful to make sure I get right along those edges. You can use the tip, make a nice line to make an edge. If you have a small board, maybe you can turn it so that way you're able to get a better reach. I'm just going along every edge, nice and carefully painting that in. So if you decide to paint it freehand, it may just take a little bit more time than the tape did, but of course putting all that tape on and taping it took some time as well. So whatever you would like to do and feel more comfortable with. I'm going to move left to right, so I'm going to go into my next square here. All right. So this is why we tape it, so that way we have a little bit more freedom and don't have to worry about being too precise. So whatever works for you. If you have a nice steady hand, this may not be that hard. Just depends. Okay, there's my second. Now I'm going to move on to my third. All right. Get my right edge here nicely. Okay. Now I'm going to do my last square on that row. And if I'm very quiet, it's because I'm concentrating so hard. Maybe you're doing this with some fun fall autumn music playing. That would be fun. Okay, now that I have that edge, that row, I'm going to move on to the next. Okay. All right. I'm going to move on to the next edge. Do the best that I can. So you're just going to continue doing this until you finish up that board. Now, if you decide to do a second color and not leave that second color the color of your board, then you're going to need to do the whole process again with a second color. It's going to be your choice if you would like to tape it over again. Just remember, make sure your paint is fully dry before you tape over the paint. Or you can just try your best and do it freehand in those other next few squares. Okay, so I'm going to leave that up to you because I'm not going to be using two colors. But whatever you do is going to be beautiful and come out perfect. And I can't wait to see just how creative you guys got with your chess or checkerboards. Okay, my next square here. Okay. Now, after you paint a few squares, if you just decide that freehand is maybe not for you, you can always still go back in and tape off the rest of your squares to finish your board off. It's all about patience. But sometimes we like just to have things a little bit nice and easy for us. That's fine too. There's nothing wrong with that. Alrighty. So I have just 2 rows to go. All right, now friends, I don't want to just stay here with you watching me paint all of these empty squares. I know everyone's working, but I do want to make sure that I am able to cover everything that you guys need for this craft today. So I'm going to just finish up with this row here, and then I'm going to leave that last row so that way we can get moving forward on to our next step. But if you're still working, feel free to press pause and continue working. That's totally up to you. I'm just going to move on. And if you need a little break from painting in your checkerboard here, feel free to take a little break, even if you don't pause. Just take a break and move on to the next step with me, and then you can always go back and finish it up. This is going to be pretty much it for our board. I am going to show you what I'm going to do to decorate the edges if you have some edges that you needed to separate from your rectangular board. So I'm going to show you what I'm going to do for that. And you can decorate that with me. You can do it on your own. But this is pretty much it for our actual checkerboard here. All right. That's all I'm going to work on for my checkerboard for now. Okay, again, if you would like to, you can just go back to it on your own. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what I'm going to do on those edges. Okay, now if your paint is still a little wet, you may need to lean on it, so you may want to wait for it to dry a little bit. But I'm going to go ahead and just move my paint over to the side. I'm going to clean off my brush. I don't want to leave that wet with paint because I don't want it to harden or ruin the brush. I'm going to clean that off the bottom of my water bucket. Clean off those bristles. And then dry my brush off. Get it nice and clean. Okay. So now that I have that painted, next what I'm going to do for those sides, I'm going to, on the writing, I am going to use a brush pen. Now if you don't have a brush pen, you can use another brush, you can use paint, write it in, you can use marker, but I have these fun metallic brush pens that are going to be super fun to use. So I'm going to go ahead and use it. I'm going to use this kind of like bronze brownish color. And again, if you are needing to lean on your board, you might want to wait for your board to dry first. But you can just go over, if you drew it in with the pencil, you can just go over those lines that you made and add in your writing. Okay, now I'm doing a little bit of script or like cursive. A little tip for cursive is whenever you're going up, you want those lines to be thin, and then whenever you come down, you want those lines to be thick. It's a little tip for you. Okay, I'll go up and down, up, down, up, and down, up, and down, and then up, down, down and around and back up to a little thin curl. Okay, so there's my happy. If you want it bigger, you want to fill up the whole area, that's again going to be up to you. I'm just going to flip mine around and write the word fall. So I'm going to go up and down, make that nice and thick. Back up, down, up, down. You can always go over it again just to make it a little bit thicker. Okay, so there's my word fall. All right, and there is my lettering, happy fall. So again, I'm making it like a fall chess or checkerboard. And then on the ends, again, you can decorate it with whatever colors you like. You can, definitely have a little bit of fun with it. These little swirly lines here. But I'm also going to be using something that I bought to add into the corners, make it a little bit more decorative. But all of that is going to be up to you. So go ahead and decide what it is you would like to add to your board and how you would like to decorate it. Now again, I'm going to be using these leaves here, and I'm going to decorate on the edge with those leaves. Okay, now whenever you are gluing anything down or taping it, you can use Elmer's glue, the school glue here, that's liquid, or you can use glue stick. However, if they are not paper, you usually want to use more of a liquid glue, or you can even use tacky glue. Tacky glue works really well for gluing things on and having it stick pretty quickly. It's also a little bit more sturdy than regular school glue. Okay, but I'm going to be using school glue here, and I'm just going to glue it on to the back of my leaf. Add that glue and place it down on my wood piece, and then add my glue to this next piece here and add that down on my wood piece as well. Okay, now that I have that, I can flip it over and do the same thing on the other side. Another thing that you can use to glue things down, some of your parents might have it, is hot glue gun. So you can definitely use a hot glue gun to help you with that as well. I'm going to take a couple more little leaves here. Okay, and I'm going to add some glue to the end at the back. And then I'm going to glue it onto my wood board. Okay, add some glue to the other leaf and glue that onto my board. All right, so now I have the decorations that I want. If you have any other decorations, any markers, anything else that you would like to decorate those edges with, you can go ahead and do that. And this is only if you have the edges on the outside of your board piece, okay? If you have a frame or like a lip like I do, you can even decorate around that. Have fun, get creative, and again, I can't wait to see what you guys create for that. Next, what I'm going to show you is how you can get different pieces for your checker pieces or your chess pieces. Now, again, I told you that I got some supplies that kind of covered a little bit of everything, just something fall. But I went and got these wooden little circular pieces here. I thought those would look great as little checker pieces. Now, of course, checkers uses two different colors. So, a way that you can make those look more like checker pieces is if you grab some paint and paint them to look a little bit more like checkers. So you can choose two colors. You can paint a few of them one color, and you can paint a few of the others a different color, and then those will go on the opposite ends of your chessboard. Now, again, I recommend using fall colors. That's what I'm going to be doing today for our crafts here. But if you would like, maybe you can do, a little decoration, like a little pattern on it. Maybe you want to paint a pumpkin on them. Maybe you want to have fun and paint different symbols, maybe like a fall leaf, autumn leaf, a pumpkin, maybe another one has like pumpkin pie. So it can become a full fall chess or checker board. Okay? So what I'm going to be doing is showing you how we can paint in some of these little pieces. So I'm not going to paint all of them just because, again, I want you guys to have fun with that and take your time on your own. But I'm just going to paint in my piece here. Okay, now if you have something similar to me, you just want to paint a little bit of it, maybe just the top, that's okay. Or maybe you want to paint the whole thing. All of that is going to really be up to you. Oh, I got a little bit of white in my brush. Okay, now this might get a little messy, so just try your best. Make sure you don't have any clumps forming. And maybe you just want to paint the top so that way the bottom looks a little different. Okay, so there we go, a little painted wooden stub. And you can just set that to the side as you let it dry. Okay. So you can continue doing that. Again, you can have one color for a few of them and then a different color for the other side. Now, for checkers and chess, you want basically the same amount of pieces on both sides. You want 16. Okay, so for checkers, those are basically any little item. Now, along with these little wooden stubs here, I also got these fun decorative little plastic figures here, or I don't know what you would call these, but they're basically little pumpkins. And so you can use, they came in 2 different colors. So I have silver and orange. And that works perfectly. So instead of making your own, if you want to just go out and get something a little small, that would work. As long as you have 16 pieces of each color, then that again would work out so nicely. You just have them, place them out, and get ready to play. Okay, so again, you want 16. Now, if you don't want to go buy your own, or if you don't want to make your own, another thing that you can do rather than these 2 ideas that I've given you already is maybe after Halloween, after you got all your candy, maybe you still have some candy saved up. Maybe you want to use your candy as your checker pieces or your chess pieces. I think that would be really fun. However, you could also maybe go outside and find some fall stuff, maybe acorns, maybe pine cones, if you can find little baby ones, maybe leaves, anything that makes you think of fall. Maybe those can become your chess or checker pieces. Now with chess, I will say that chess has a little bit more of a complicated look and idea to it. It's not just regular game pieces. They have specific pieces that do specific things. If you know the game of chess, maybe you already have a chessboard, you already have chess pieces, you can use this chessboard that you've just made and then use your chess pieces with that. However, if you would like to make your own chess pieces, then what you can do is maybe you have these wooden things and these other objects that you've purchased. You can tape them or glue them together. You can still paint this and have some fun, decorate them. Maybe this one would be the king. Maybe this one would be the queen. Okay, maybe you have some other pieces, like for my leaves here, maybe I can change that to look like a different kind of piece, maybe the bishop, maybe the rook, okay, maybe a knight. So you can definitely have fun with that, make them look a little different. Or if you just find, all of the same items, like these little stones here that I have as part of the little pack. These are just regular stones. I can use these as pawns since there's so many. Or as checker pieces, I can have orange ones, and then maybe I want to dip this into some paint. So I have orange, and now I have a white piece. Or maybe you want to make it metallic and silver like this one. Or maybe you want to make it brown and orange, okay? So again, all of this is just about having fun, getting creative, and doing something to get in the fall spirit. So I hope you guys really had a lot of fun with this project, and I hope you guys learned and created together, got creative, and were able to make your very own chess or checker board and decorated your different pieces and decided how you wanted to make those. Again, maybe you use your Halloween candy, maybe you find things from outside. Whatever it is, I hope you guys have a lot of fun, and I can't wait for your board to dry so that way you can actually try it and play a game of checkers or chess with your friends and family. So once again, thank you all so much for being here with me today. Thank you so much for joining in on this class. I really hope you enjoyed this, and I can't wait to see what you guys created and how creative you got. Happy fall, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.